Hey, this is Jamie from Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to talk about Stonemaier Games themselves. Specifically, I'm going to talk about my design regrets. And really, it's my design and development regrets because I work quite a bit as a developer for games that I don't design at Stonemaier Games, but I also do design some of our games as well. So I'm going to go through each of our games in chronological order and talk specifically about about design regrets, focusing mostly on mechanical elements of the game, but maybe I'll bring in a few other non-mechanical elements. And I'm going to focus on the core games, not the expansions here. So, and also, I want to note up front that none of these regrets are so big that I would change them in a future printing or future edition. Actually, I don't want to say that globally, but these are usually these are regrets, but they're small regrets. They're things that I've learned from, and I don't think they ruin any of these games by any means. If they did, then I would issue some sort of errata or variant, and a few of them I have issued official variants for the things that I'll mention here today. Let's start with Viticulture. Viticulture has actually evolved quite a bit over time because there was the original Viticulture in 2012, then there was the second edition, and then there was the Essential Edition in 2015, which is the edition of the game. That's what I refer to when I say Viticulture these days. There are two little things that I think of when I look at the Viticulture board that I regret a little bit. One of them is the sell grapes action. This action has now been boosted because now you can not only sell grapes to that action, but you can also buy or sell fields. And I think that makes this action much more appealing than the original version of that action, which is just sell grapes. But looking back at it, I kind of wish I had made it buy or sell grapes. Maybe kind of an early version of the trade action that shows up in Tuscany. Because it's pretty rare that I would ever really want to sell grapes. Like, I hardly ever use that action. It's really a dead action, or that part of that action. But if I could buy grapes, I would definitely consider that. Because there are times in the game where I really wish I could just buy a grape that I need at that certain point in time to turn into wine. And that would be really helpful. So I kind of wish I'd made that a buy or sell grapes action. Also in Viticulture, the original board, I actually really like the original board for teaching the game to new players and even just for playing Viticulture. While I can see why players mostly prefer the Tuscany board, I do enjoy the original Viticulture board. And I would recommend it for teaching new players, I would say that. However, the one thing I really regret about it is that I didn't put any bonuses on the 1 to 2 player action spaces, the far left action spaces. They are bonus free. All the bonuses on the original board are on the middle action spaces, so you can't access them unless you're playing a 3+ player game. And I kind of wish I had, I think I was a little bit too worried about symmetry in terms of having all actions structured the same way. Whereas there are some actions where you probably could have that bonus on the first action in a 2-player game in particular, and not have it be overly imbalanced. Like the action of giving a wine tour, making earning $3 or 3 lira instead of 2 lira, is not a game-breaking thing if you happen to be the first player that round to get that bonus. Basically, I was kind of avoiding giving too much power to the player who was going first for that round or that year. But I think I could have chosen some actions to put a bonus on the 1 to 2 player action space. So that's Viticulture. Euphoria was our next game to release, another Jamie Stonemaier design. And my regret for this game definitely is that when you roll pairs in the game, it feels really good because by the Euphoria rules, the original Euphoria rules, if you roll pairs and you have at least a pair of dice that show the same exact number at the beginning of your turn, you can place both of those dice on your turn. So it gives players a reason to go after more dice and to retrieve more dice, even though there's a risk to that as well, because they might end up at the beginning of their turn with multiple dice of the same number, so they get to take more than one action on the same turn, which feels really good. I think the spirit of this mechanism is really, really good. The problem is it can definitely lead to certain players getting lucky more often than other players simply by the roll of the die. And so the official variant that I think is great, and it is now the rule of the game when you play with Euphoria Ignorance is Bliss, the expansion, is that if you start your turn with, say, a pair of 6s and you want to place the second 6 on your turn, so you place the first 6, if you want to then place the second 6, you need to pay 1 morale. To do that. So even though there's a little bit of luck involved, there's also a cost involved. So you have to manage your morale better if you want to have the potential of placing more than one worker on your turn. I think that's a great variant. I wish I had thought of that for the original game. That's my regret for Euphoria. For Between Two Cities. Between Two Cities is a very streamlined game, and it isn't one that I designed. This is designed by Ben Rossett and Matthew O'Malley. I feel like I'm a little more forgiving for games designed by other designers than I am on myself. I'm much more harsh on myself. And so I really could not think of a mechanical element of Between Two Cities that I would change, other than maybe if we had thought of the little maps that you put in the expansion. If we had thought of that and put that into the core game, because they make the game much more colorful. And that actually ties to my regret, which is that I think my art direction for the game could have been a little bit better. I love Beth Sobel's art in the game, especially the variety that she put into these buildings. But the effect, and this is a very specific, but the effect of having tiles with gray cobblestone borders next to other tiles with gray cobblestone borders is that you end up with a lot of gray in front of you. And we realized later through a localization partner that you can reduce that effect by making the tiles bigger and a little brighter and making those borders a little thinner too. Because if you do that, then there's less gray once you've built your city on the table. And so I kind of wish we had realized that up front and had a little bit less gray on the table as a result of those of the multitude of thick gray bordered tiles in the game. So that's Between Two Cities. In Scythe, I have a few regrets. I'm really happy with how Scythe worked out, but I have a few little things. There's one that's talked about fairly frequently, and that is the end of the game in Scythe. Whenever a player reaches 6 stars, the game ends immediately. And the spirit of that is, A, you need to pay attention to other players. That's really important. It's not a total surprise when the game ends if you pay attention to other players and see that there is the possibility of the game ending at any time. That's really important. I think it's good in Scythe that you need to pay attention to other players throughout the game. Also, the key to the reason of that is that I want to give a player a strong reason to actually end the game. Because in many playtests of Scythe, before we had that rule, we found that players would prolong the end of the game in the hopes of getting a slightly better score. And then all other players are kind of doing the same thing. And so you're extending the game beyond its welcome if you do that. So I wanted to give players a strong reason to end the game. And the reason here is if you get your 6th star, no other players can take a turn. That's a huge advantage for you. However, there are some downsides to it. It can feel a little sudden. You might have one last thing that you really wish you could do, but you can't do it. And so I kind of wish in hindsight that the rule had been that after a player triggers the end of the game, all players, including that player, get one final turn, but they are not allowed to move. They're not allowed to take the move action. This being really key to that idea of being the player to end the game, because oftentimes, I think Scythe works really well when it ends with a climactic moment of a player involved in usually combat or some sort of territorial control where they spread out and they do something big. And they don't want other players to take another turn because that would greatly decrease the impact of their big play. And so I that's kind of one regret that I have there, that I didn't think of that rule or that idea of letting each player take one more turn, but they're not allowed to move. And we do implement something like that and really a variety of endgame conditions and triggers and rules in the Wind Gamut expansion. So if you don't like the endgame for Scythe, try the Wind Gamut. I bet you'll find a resolution tile that you really like. The other little thing for Scythe that is not discussed all that often, but it is a question that comes up frequently. And I should mention that as I was creating this list, I looked through the FAQs, the frequently asked question lists for each of these games to see what players are actually asking a lot about, to see if it could remind me of any of my design regrets. And this one is that in Scythe, one of the most common questions is about producing workers. And I think part of the reason for that is that workers are produced in workers are produced in the same way as resources, but because they're pulled from your player mat, and there's a cost involved, and it's the produce action that they're pulled from on your player mat, that there's some confusion about the timing of like, how much am I actually paying for these workers? Am I paying for what I'm revealing? And I think the rules are pretty clear, but we still get a lot of questions about that. So I kind of wish I had not associated workers with production and instead created the enlist action around enlisting workers, or maybe even change the name of it. And so basically I'm saying that you would not produce workers at all. If you want more workers, you have to take the enlist action instead. I kind of wish I had done that. That's maybe my biggest design regret about Scythe. Next up is Charterstone. Charterstone has definitely by far the biggest FAQ about any of these games, maybe Tapestry being second highest, but Charterstone has a lot of questions in the FAQ. And so I kind of wish in general that not only would the rules be clear, but would the rules kind of constantly reinforce these ideas? Because all these ideas are in the rules for Charterstone, but I think players in a legacy game need reminders of various rules as they play. And but there's one variant that we've created for Charterstone that I think is a good variant, and that is the rule in Charterstone is that if there are any tokens on a building, you can't construct a building on top of it. So you can't take a sticker and you can't put it on top of that sticker in Charterstone. And the reason for this is that, you know, there's stuff in the way and of you putting that sticker down. So physically, it like makes putting a sticker down more difficult, and it adds to weird rule situations where a worker or a token meant one thing on the building when it was sticker A, but now if you put a new sticker on that and you still have those tokens on it, what do they mean? Or do they go away? What does that mean? It creates, you know, all these other rule complications. But I kind of wish, I think those complications may have been worth it, because there are frustrating moments in Charterstone where you really want to put a building on a place, but there's something in the way of you doing so. And usually it doesn't matter. Like there's no negative impact if you were just allowed to do that. And so my variant, if you're playing Charterstone in person, is if it doesn't create any weird situations, go ahead and put the sticker there, like, and just put the tokens back on top of that building, or even return them to the player if it's a player's worker or something like that. Return their worker to them. Just do the more fun thing in that instance. The other little thing about Charterstone is I tried to balance. So in Charterstone, you have these. It's kind of this building tech tree that's under the surface. You can't really see it, but it's there. So as you construct a building, that building can create some paths that you can then open a crate that can let you build one building or another building. And those buildings might have paths as well that you can branch out to. And so there's this progression of buildings that branch out from a simple building to a complex, more futuristic building. And I kind of rubber banded myself in terms of how powerful those later buildings were. By making their costs higher. In fact, there are a number of buildings in Charterstone that are strictly better versions of previous buildings, or they should be strictly better. They are better in terms of their benefits, but their costs are also higher. And I kind of wish I had just made them strictly better, just give them better benefits and the same cost or a slightly different cost, but not a higher cost. I think that would have felt better, because there are times in Charterstone where I'm like, well, I have this building that's not all that expensive to use and the benefit's pretty good. Or do I put a very similar building on top of it that has a marginally better benefit, but is then more expensive to use? And it doesn't always feel good to do that. So I kind of wish I had just let myself make later buildings strictly better. That's Charterstone. Now we're on to My Little Scythe. We're kind of in an era of Stonemaier games here where very few games were designed by me. My Little Scythe is one of the first ones. And by far, I would say the most common question I get about My Little Scythe is how movement works. So if your units aren't carrying around if your characters aren't carrying around any resources in My Little Scythe, they can move up to 2 hexes. However, if they're carrying around resources, they're kind of weighed down, they can only move 1 hex. The question that comes up is, what if you move a character that's not carrying around anything onto a hex, and they pick up something? Are they then allowed to move again, or can they not? And the answer is they can't. They cannot move because they've already moved once. But I can see how it's confusing as to whether or not they can actually do that. So I'm not even sure exactly how I would change that in a revised version of My Little Scythe. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but I might just get rid of that rule altogether. Just say that you can always move up to 2 spaces, regardless of what you're carrying around. Maybe that's more fun that way, and definitely would remove this question about can I continue to move or not. That would be the one thing that I changed about My Little Scythe. Otherwise, I'm really happy with how it turned out. Another Ben Rossett and Matthew O'Malley design is Between Two Castles. And Between Two Castles, again, I don't have many mechanical regrets at all about how the game turned out. However, I do have another art direction regret, which comes down to me, the art direction, and that is I should have pushed for bigger text and bigger icons on the tiles. Because the icons in particular are pretty small, the icons that tell you how the tile works. There are other ways to get that information. There's a rules reference card that every player has that you can read, but there's icon. You're meant to be able to play the game without using that card. And if the icons were bigger, that would be great. We did actually fix this in a future printing of Between Two Castles, where we made the icons and the text bigger on the tiles. And I think it helped for a lot of people, especially in low lighting or vision impairment. That's been a learning point throughout Stonemaier games, keeping in mind vision impairment and low lighting for the font contrast and the font size in our games. That's Between Two Castles. We're about halfway through here. We're on to Wingspan. And Wingspan, has done very well. It brought people a lot of joy, which is the goal here at Stonemaier Games. And there's really just one little, there are probably little things about specific cards that I might change a little bit. There was a typo that impacted the first printing, things like that. Always with any game, there's going to be little things like that. But the one thing that I think I would change that continues to this day, really, is the phrasing of when activated. And I think Elizabeth and I had a little bit of a debate about this. And who knows, when activated could be the correct way to go. But I think I would prefer for that phrase to be if activated, because it's often confused, at least by new players, with when played. When you play a card, this ability activates, versus when activated, that's when you're taking your turn down a card row, a habitat, and you're activating that card. And the reason I like if more than when is that it indicates that players have a choice as to whether or not they can activate that ability, which is true. Every time you move on to a when activated ability, you have a choice to activate that ability or not. And we get a lot of questions about that, like can I activate, can I choose not to activate it if I want? And I think if would indicate if you have activated it, go ahead and gain the benefits or do the thing. But you also don't have to activate it. And so that's just one little phrasing thing, but it would have impacted a lot of cards in Wingspan, so it's not something we're going to change at this point. But I'm curious actually what you think about that, if that would have been more clear to you if we had used if activated instead of when activated. That's Wingspan. For Tapestry, I have a few things. One thing is something that we've fixed in the Arts and Architecture expansion, much to the chagrin of some players, and that is that we added a rule saying that you are not allowed to activate the same advancement space twice on the same turn. There's certain abilities in Tapestry that can lead to turns where you're kind of looping abilities multiple times in really overpowered ways. And that can feel good in Tapestry. It's good to do overpowered things in Tapestry. But I think it's also good to close loopholes that can lead to things that are just too powerful, especially with the sheer number of combinations of civilizations, capital cities, and Tapestry cards, and tech cards in Tapestry. And so I kind of wish we had said that up front. Just as a global rule, you can only activate each advancement space once per turn, whether that's an income turn or an advancement turn. I think that would have closed a lot of loopholes while still leading the possibility of a lot of kind of moments that feel overpowered in Tapestry, which I think is a good thing. The other thing that I think I would change, this is something that we still could potentially change if we wanted, I think there are some house rule variants about it, is at the end of the military track, you can gain a new civilization. And you are meant to just draw one random civilization. The rule is you draw one random civilization and you add it to your player tableau. And I probably should have said that players draw two and then pick one. There are a few civilizations that say, like, if you draw this in the middle of the game, discard it and pick another one, which is one way to approach it. But I just think I think it would have given players a little bit more, like, you want players to feel really good when they get to the end of the track and have a really good, powerful bonus. And I kind of wish I changed that. And even as I'm saying that, I'm remembering one other thing that I would prefer to change, and that is near the end of I think it's the nanotechnology action, where there's a bonus of spending. You have to pay a certain number of tech cards, get rid of a certain number of tech cards, 3 tech cards, to gain 10 victory points. And that trade-off isn't really worth it, because at that point you are probably already getting income from your tech track based on the number of tech cards you have. And so I kind of wish I had made that 2 tech cards instead of 3 tech cards. Yeah, a couple little things to Tapestry there. In Pendulum, so Pendulum is a big one, and I don't know if this is, this is actually a tough one to think of a regret, because I really like what Travis did with Pendulum, but I still understand that it didn't resonate with a lot of people. And I think a lot of that is due to the real-time nature of the game. I think maybe I would have pushed harder to make Pendulum a simultaneous game, but not a game with timers. because I really think that everything else about Pendulum is really, really well designed. And even the timer system is really well designed. I don't want to take away from that. But I think the types of gamers that resonate with the level of medium weight, like middle weight Euro style play in Pendulum, the style of choices you're making there, are not the types of players who want to be rushed into their decisions. And you can end up feeling a little rushed in Pendulum at times. Not all the time. Sometimes you have too much time, but there are times where you can feel a little rushed. And I think by making it simultaneous without the timers, I think that would have eliminated that concern. The good thing, though, is that the game does have a simultaneous mode in the game. Like there's a tile in the game that shows you exactly how to play simultaneous, but not in real time. And I think that's a very good way to play. I think that's a completely valid way to play. It's in the box itself, but I kind of wish we had made that the default and then made the timer version the backup to that if players wanted to try it. If they wanted to be a little wild, then do the timed version. That is Pendulum. A few more games left here. We have Red Rising. So in Red Rising, definitely the clear pick for me of the thing that I would change, and it's so clear that we have an official variant that says the following. When choosing one or more opponents to banish, potentially banish, or steal a card from their hand without the immediate ability to regain a card, you may... So that's the first phrase. So that's the idea of forcing an opponent basically to banish one of their cards from hand, to get rid of a card, to go from 5 cards to 4 cards, or 6 cards to 5 cards. I'll continue here. The variant is you may only choose players who have more cards in hand than their starting hand. And we've phrased it this way because while most players start with 5 cards, the House Series player starts with 6 cards. The ruling goes on to say you can still deploy cards with such abilities, but any abilities related to choosing an opponent won't trigger. So, for example, the first turn in the game, I have a card that says target opponent banishes a card from their hand. That can be a really big blow early on in the game. I think later in the game, those abilities are a lot more balanced. If a player, and they're meant to kind of keep certain players in check. If a player has been really good at adding additional cards to their hand, a card that makes them banish one of those cards is really powerful and can be really important. And those banish cards are balanced in other ways. Usually they're really good cards to keep in hand, and so you don't want to deploy them to use that banish ability, things like that. But it can be just really disheartening early on in a game of Red Rising for a player to banish one of their 5 cards, their starting 5 cards, and all of a sudden they're down to 4 cards. And so I really like this variant, and I would highly recommend that you play with it. That's my regret from Red Rising. In Rolling Realms, there's a regret that I have that actually didn't stem up until 2 of the promo packs that came about. And I like that different promo packs in different realms and Rolling Realms are different difficulty levels, and they range in how many dice that you actually need to complete that realm and to get a bunch of resources and to get all 6 stars. However, there are 2 promo realms where you can't, there's certain resources that you can't earn them at all. I'll actually show them to you. So in Terra Mystica, let's see, with the Terra Mystica realm, there's Libertalia, there's the second one I'm going to talk about. In Terra Mystica, there's no way to gain coins in Terra Mystica. Coins are one of the 3 resources: pumpkins, hearts, and coins. And while I think it's interesting for one realm not to give you coins, I kind of wish for any realm that you can get any of the 3 resources because, I don't know, I just like it better that way. And the other realm, not only is there one realm, but there are 2 realms that do it in Libertalia because these are pirates. They're not giving up their gold to you, but I think it would be a slightly better design if I had put a pirate here that actually gives you a coin. So that is my regret from Rolling Realms, and it won't happen again in future promos, or I can't guarantee it, but I think it's highly unlikely that we would not just entirely not have one of the 3 resources in the game on one of the realms in Rolling Realms. Yeah, so that's my regret from Rolling Realms. And last, speaking of Libertalia, we have Libertalia Winds of Galecrest. 2 little regrets here. One, again, is an art direction choice that I made, and that is I don't quite know what I was thinking here, but the $3 coins in Libertalia have 5 sides. They are 5-sided tokens, and so whenever I look at those tokens, I think that is a $5 coin, $5 doubloon, because it has 5 sides. That's how my brain works for some reason, and I'm guessing this is confusing for other people as well. And so I wish it had been any other shape other than 5, because there is also a $5 coin, a $5 doubloon in the game that is circular. So I kind of wish maybe we had reversed those shapes and made the $5 coin 5-sided and made the $3 coin either a triangle or a circle for more clarity there. The other one is the question that I think I've gotten the most about Libertalia is about the cook. The cook says this: unless you first gain a hook token, gain a second loot token from the current day. And that confuses a lot of people. The spirit of that rule is that one of the hook abilities, and there are 2 hook abilities in Libertalia, which adds to the confusion here, and only one of them says the character who gains the hook, discard that character, place them in your graveyard. They go away, they die. And so the reason here is, it's saying if your cook dies, they don't also get to gain a second loot token. But we could have probably said that in a different way, and I think it added to a lot of confusion, especially since the hook doesn't always discard the character. But the spirit of the cook is, in most circumstances, you are just gaining 2 loot tokens one by one. It just so happens that first token, if for some reason the first token you gain is a hook, the cook is just discarded right away. But you're never going to do that, of course, right? Because if there is a hook that you need to take, you'll take that second, most likely, and then take the other one. Although there probably are circumstances where maybe you're trying to have the hook avoid taking, or the cook avoid taking a relic, or a bad thing, a cursed item, something like that. But it just added that wording. And that's the odd thing about Libertalia is we worked really, really hard to get the wording as accurate as possible so that there wouldn't have to be FAQs and questions on Board Game Geek and in the Facebook group. But even then, some things slipped through, and in our effort to avoid confusion, we actually added some confusion in the instance of the cook. So yeah, those are my design regrets, mostly mechanical things, some of them art direction and wording related. And I don't know. Hopefully you can get a sense for the types of things that I think about when I look back at our games, at Stonemaier games, through this video. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on the different decisions that we made. I'm happy to answer any questions about design decisions that we've made. Your question might already be answered in the FAQ of that game. Feel free to check that, but I'm also happy to answer here, or I can copy and paste over from the FAQ if it's already there anyway. Let me know your questions in the comments below. Thanks.